with Plano Sewing Guild, and this is our series on men in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that are also interested in sewing. We always think about sewing as primarily a women's work or women's arts and crafts, but this series is really highlighting the diversity of kinds of sewing that men in Dallas do. So I want to introduce you to Michael Waid, who is the did I say that right?
You did. Oh yeah, you're good.
Michael is the costume director for Dallas Theater Center. So with that, I'm going to let you tell us kind of about your history, how you came to that job, as well as your history and interest in the art and craft of sewing.
I've been at the Dallas Theater Center for a little over 2.5 years. As the costume director, I run the entire costume department, which includes everyone within the costume shop staff, but also the hair and makeup staff and the wardrobe staff. Prior to that, I've been in theater for 23 or 4 years now, and I've been sewing for about 23 years. Prior to that, I lived out in West Texas, and I was the resident costume designer for a very small little community theater company, the Midland Community Theater, which is I believe it's the second largest community theater in the nation, I believe. But, getting started in all of this was in college. I'd taken the drama theater class in high school when I was a senior because I just had an extra slot to fill. So I took the class because I thought it'd be fun. And then I moved away to college as an education major. I was going to teach physics and chemistry. I wanted to do science in high school. And by the end of my first semester, I was a theater major.
Okay.
So it did
was
not
it reproduction that changed your mind?
I had taken an acting class my first semester, totally because I figured I would be really stressed out in college. So I decided I'm going to take one class every semester that I think is fun, even if I don't need it, which is really kind of ridiculous when you think about it. But I had taken the acting class because I thought it'd be fun. And so I got to know all the theater people, and I had so much more fun over there than in biology class, So I switched my major. So I was studying acting and musical theater, and I was performing, and also working in the costume shop. And I became closer and closer with those people. So I spent more and more time there. And that's where I learned to sew. That's where I started learning how to make patterns. Let's see. So after I graduated, I moved away and began working with the LSU Opera as their costume designer for a couple of specific shows for a few years. But I also worked as a stage manager and a backstage crew out on the LSU campus. And that solidified wanting to remain in the costume world. So I went to graduate school. I went back to Alabama at the University of Alabama this time. And I have my master's degree in costume design and technology. So since then, that's been years now. I graduated in 2007, and I've been working as an educator and a designer and a costume builder ever since.
So just quick question on that, your study path, was that the costume history as well as mechanics of creating costumes?
It does include costume history, yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then you ended up at Dallas Theater Center.
Yes, and that's where I'm at right now. And of course, we're also struggling during the corona apocalypse like everyone else. So we've been working from home since March, but we are still employed, unlike a lot of the theater industry. As a whole, it's pretty much shut down, but we're still going. We've been making masks and distributing those to the DFW community. I think we're over 2,100 masks at this point. But we're also creating the production video series where I'm talking about how to make your own mask. And so I'm actually filming today. I'm filming my second of 4 videos for that.
Okay. Okay. And so can you give us an idea of those that haven't been locally to the Dallas Theater Center of the range of type of costuming that are in the productions?
It's all over the place. Every show needs something different. We do Christmas Carol every year. That's a remount. Those costumes are, in the span of the 1800s, a traditional kind of Christmas Carol look. And we, like January, we did Little Women, which was also in a similar vein of style, but then we'll do very modern today kind of shows where we'll just purchase the clothing.
So whenever a production is planned, are you working hand in hand with the director or the producers to decide are the costuming going to be authentic to that period or adjusted, or what's that
Well,
process like?
I am the costume director, but I'm not the costume designer
Okay.
for the theater. We hire different independent costume designers for every show, and they will talk with the directors about the style of the show, what the show needs. They will make the decisions about the design and the look of the show, and then they will give that information to us, and we'll determine, okay, how do we make these things? Should we purchase them? Is it a modern show? Do we need to build them? Do we already have something that could work and we can just adapt it? And I disseminate that information out to the team that I have for building, altering, that kind of thing, shopping.
So how big is your warehouse? And I only ask because last year I went to Stratford to see their warehouse of costuming, which is like this humongous building. And they do things like custom make shoes for the lead actor in their shows.
Ours is not going to be like that. It's not that extensive at all. Our currently we in the costume shop staff specifically, there are only four of us. So we do not build our own shoes. We purchase shoes. We might paint them. We might alter them a little bit, but we're not going to build them. Our storage facility, the entire building is down in the warehouse district. I think the entire building is, I think it's 30,000 square feet, but that includes the scene shop. That's where all the scenery is built. It includes the props department and their storage, and it includes the costume storage. I think the costume storage is probably, if I had to guess, between 2,000 and 2,500 square feet. And it's mostly modern. That's the majority of what we do, though we do have some fun, very strange things in there, like you do with costume storage.
Well, the most interesting thing I learned in that, I guess it was the visit there is that the cleaning process and the use of vodka as like the number one deodorizer cleaner for costumes in between costuming.
Right, we do use that sometimes. And we don't replace it. It doesn't replace cleaning a costume, but it kind of extends the life of a costume between cleanings.
Right.
'Cause just the way our schedule is laid out, we can only dry clean maybe once a week.
Sure, sure.
But if we're doing 8 shows a week, eventually, maybe on show like 4, the costume's gonna get it might get a little stinky. So we take care of that with things like vodka. It might not always be vodka, but
Right, right.
we might use Lysol, or there's another product called End Back that we use, kind of an antibacterial.
Sure.
But a lot of companies do really rely on vodka.
So outside of work, do you take up sewing as a creative endeavor? What kind of sewing do you do outside of making masks?
I have picked it up more lately. I used to, before I moved to Dallas, when I was working in Midland, I also owned my own business, a custom sewing business and a custom dye work business. But out there, my house was large enough that I had my own shop inside my house.
Okay.
So I had the space for it. But here, I just live in a small little apartment right now, and I do not have the space for all of that. So I did shut down the business, and I've not been doing a lot of sewing outside of work, mainly, and this has been a constant problem throughout my entire career, is that once I get home, I don't really want to sew.
Yeah.
I've been in a sewing room all day long. I just kind of don't feel like it.
Right.
But the last couple of months, we a couple of us from the DFW sewing Facebook group have splintered off and created a DFW wearables group where we specifically focus on garment sewing.
Mhm.
And so we've been having regular meetings every other Tuesday on Zoom like this. And we are all starting to build clothing and things like that. And I'm beginning to focus the clothing that I'm making right now, I'm focusing on myself.
Sure.
Because all these years, everybody always thinks that I make a lot of my clothing, and I hardly make anything for myself because I'm constantly making things for other people. So this was a nice way to finally focus on making something for myself that I could wear, that I can enjoy. So that's what I've been focusing on lately.
Well, sometimes the pandemic gives us something good comes out of it, just a step
Right.
back from our normal day to day.
It's true.
So can you tell me, do you have who or what might your inspirations be?
Most of my inspiration comes from art, from painters. I really like surrealism, like Salvador Dali and Rene Magritte, those kinds of painters. I just love looking at their art, and I feel like just viewing it inspires me. There's some other non-surrealist painters that I like as well, like Maxfield Parrish.
Mhm.
He's a neoclassical imagery, that
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
thing.
It's like the creator of those colors that really didn't exist before.
Right. Beautiful tones, and I just love staring at them. I've recently been introduced to a an artist who is also a costume and a scenic designer, Alexandra Egster. She's a Russian constructivist. Um, Her and I was unfamiliar until just a couple of weeks ago, but I've just kind of fallen in love with her work. So I've been staring at that a lot lately. And then, kinds of some typical artists like Gustav Klimt, Georgia O'Keeffe, and her sister, Ida O'Keeffe. They were both really great painters. Um, I think besides that, it's mainly, I'm into nature. And so I just like, especially the sky and the night sky, the stars and the moon, those kinds of things inspire me as well.
Yeah, those clear West Texas big sky definitely is something that you don't see here quite as often.
It's true.
So in thinking about the sewing community, I know that you and I are both members of the Dallas-Fort Worth sewing Facebook group. You mentioned that you splintered off a wearables group because that's a big group that has all different kinds of interests. What do you think that the sewing community and guilds like mine could do to be more inclusive, to bring more men into our group, or groups that we haven't really attracted in the past?
I I think really the only thing that stands out to me in that vein is recognizing that men are there. And I get that we're not the majority. I totally get that. But I have this pet peeve. When people post in a group like the sewing group and they start off their post with, "Hey ladies," you know, they're just kind of assuming that everybody in the group is a lady. And I usually, sometimes I'm snarky and I'll make a little comment about it, but I've gotten to where maybe I'll just ignore it.
Yeah.
Uh, but little tiny little things like that, recognizing that there are men that are there that do sew and that do sewing related things professionally.
Right, right.
Um, that's probably one of the larger things that I would consider for on a larger scale, like pattern companies and things like that, there really aren't that many patterns directed at men. It's pretty limited, and I just wish there were more options and more style. I mean, I can make a pattern and I can alter a pattern, but if there was something that just existed that I didn't have to, that I could just cut it out.
Exactly.
That would be pretty cool.
And it does seem that the big four pattern companies are kind of stuck in a less than trendy for men patterns. I mean, you have a limited number A, but then seem like they're very
basic,
right? That there's not really a big branch out for men's patterns. I agree.
It's true. And in a lot of ways, I mean, I can understand that, but I just wish there were just a little more attention to that. It would just be nice, I think.
It would be. And I think that the rise of the independent pattern maker through the PDF patterns, I think that you'll start to see a lot more groups being represented that haven't been represented in the past.
I'd agree with that.
So what do you think that you have a good tip for our sewing audience? Either from the costuming side, something secret about the costuming world that we should know that we could apply to regular sewing, or something in your experience that you have found that's your best sewing tip?
This might be more of a design tip than a sewing tip, but I think a lot of people are afraid to branch out from expectations. When you see a pattern and you find some pretty fabric, okay, that's great, but I feel like a lot of the things that people end up making are expected. It's something that you could probably find at the store, instead of taking that turn that there's a kind of a weird uniqueness that you could harness since you're making this all yourself. You were in total control of what it might look like. So take that weird fabric and pair it with something weird and see what you get. And maybe you'll end up with this kooky, weird garment that you would never see anyone else wearing. And maybe you'll get a few funny looks, but you're also going to get those looks that are like, there's that artistic edge that I wish I could see in everyday clothing, instead of your regular, like the men's patterns we were just talking about. Instead of those super basic, these are khakis and this is a polo shirt. I want people to be more expressive in their everyday clothing. And I could say that about myself too, because I mean, look what I'm wearing. I just got this shirt at the store, so it's not like it's trendy or cool or interesting, but taking that.
I know. Before the pandemic, my husband has a global job, so we spend quite a bit of time traveling the world. And I love being in other countries and seeing, one of my favorites is being in Japan and seeing the really younger generation out on a casual day, because men and women will be, it's that, oh, wow, I've never seen a guy that has one pant leg one color and another pant leg another color.
Right.
It looks great, and I wouldn't see that, but it's that element of surprise and uniqueness that I really appreciate as well.
That adventuresome nature about. I wish I saw more of that.
Right.
For sure.
Well, it's been so nice talking to you, and I'm going to put the links to the Dallas Theater Center, because that you have created some educational videos, as well as when the season will start up again. Encourage everybody to come out and see live theater. It's something I truly missed during the pandemic, and they could use your support during this pandemic as well. So
certainly.
I'll include all of those links.
Thank you so much. It was really great.
You're very welcome.